Hello and welcome to video number 11 in my series where I explain how I use external controllers using X's and O's to connect to Microsoft Flight Simulator. I've called this one the test flight. It's a demonstration flight really to show you as many functions as I can in one flight using the G1000, the autopilot and the flight planning software. Okay, so let's get started. I've planned a flight from Manchester across to Doncaster, Sheffield. Normally, of course, it would be a straightforward direct flight, but I've taken a little detour here so that we can pick up flying towards a radio navigation beacon, VOR. If you're not familiar with these, there's a radio transmitter on a hill here called Pole Hill. And it sends out a different signal on each of the radials, so the equipment in our plane can work out which of the radials we're flying along and pick that up and to follow it. Over here at Leeds Bradford, I'm not that interested in the airport, not going to land there, but there's a different type of beacon here called a non-directional beacon. And this one just transmits saying I'm here, and it doesn't send out any information about the direction, but the equipment in the plane can find the strongest signal and point towards the strongest signal, so it points there, but it's not 100% accurate, but it's useful. It's probably the oldest system still in operation. So we'll fly this way, but there are a few functions of the GPS system I'm going to show you around this area here. So we'll fly that way, and then we'll pick up the GPS again, and we will fly towards Doncaster, Sheffield, and hopefully we'll pick up a procedure that will allow us to follow that using the GPS and then come in and use an ILS landing. So there's as many systems as I can show you in one of these short flights. I will edit out some of the boring bits when we're travelling between on the long haul bits of a whole 33 nautical miles, but that's what we're going to do. So out of Manchester, Echo Golf Charlie Charlie, and into Doncaster, Sheffield over here. Okay, and that is Echo Golf Charlie November. So this is where I'm parked, engine running at the moment, parked at Manchester Airport. I haven't put any flight plan or anything in, I've just used the world map to park myself here. And I'll have a quick look here, and I will put up my my X-touch Mini up here so you can see what's going on. So the G1000 in this aircraft is actually divided into two screens, and this one is really the primary flight display, and it has the information for flying, the artificial horizon and compass and speed, elevation, everything there. So that's what this is really designed for. The detailed view of flight plans and things are on the secondary display, the MFD, the main flight display over here. But these are the buttons that we've got programmed into the X-touch Mini, and it's this double rotary controller here with the outer and the inner. And I haven't actually programmed any of these buttons into it, so I don't use this section very often, but I'll show you what it has got available to us. So we don't want to disrupt our view of the instruments, so it gives us little snippet views of the flight plan. So there's no flight plan at the moment. You don't get to see much of it. The details are over here. The same with procedure. We can select a procedure from here, but the details of the procedure is better viewed over here. What it has got of some interest to us is a timer. If you're flying old-fashioned navigation where you need to time your 2-minute turns or time your distance to travel, we have got a timer here, and we can also put various speed references onto the speed tape here. And I'm going to put VY, which is our best rate of climb, onto that tape. and they've calculated at 74 knots. I came up with 76 knots when I did a previous video, and I programmed that in on here as my best rate to climb. So 74, 76, it's pretty close. So to put that onto here, brought up the timer and reference here, and I make sure that I am in layer B, because layer B gives us these functions under here, and I'm using this primary flight display outer and inner knob. So if I press once on this one here, that gives us the cursor, which we can move using the outer knob down to here, and I want this to be switched on, and I select the on by rotating this. Each time I rotate it clockwise, it turns it on, anti-clockwise turns it off, and get rid of the flashing cursor and get rid of that. So that will be on our speed tape. As we take off, you should see a little yellow, green Y, letter Y on there. The next button across here gives us the nearest airport. Useful in an emergency, if you declare an emergency and need to find a local nearby airport to land at. That's where we are at the moment, EGCC, and if I want to scroll through that, again, using the outer knob, I can scroll down and look at other nearby airports, and you can see the length of the runway, and you could fly direct to that. So you can use this if you need to, but really the interesting stuff is over here. So again, looking at these two knobs here, which are working here, the outer knob, one turn of the outer knob here brings up airport information. Another turn brings up the only setting that we can configure, which is the spacing of the frequencies for the radio, but we don't need to work with that. Next turn, again, look at the nearest airports, but now we've got the information that we need, frequencies and the runways information, much more useful for us. And then back to the map again. So let's have a look here at the waypoint information. If I wanted to look at the information for the airport we're at, bring up the cursor by pressing here and start rotating. So I want Echo Golf Charlie Charlie. So the inner knob takes us through the alphabet, and the outer knob moves us across a position so we can put the next one in. So Echo Golf Charlie Charlie. And there's Manchester, and you can see the map has been changing, showing us where we're looking at, so that corresponds to that. That's fine, and we'll press enter. So we've got that. Okay, so we've got the frequencies here, and one of the things we want to look at is the ATIS. We need to find out which runway we're using today. So bring up the cursor and use the outer knob to move down to that. And one of the nice things we can do is we can actually bring that frequency up to the comms standby. So if we press enter on that, there it is in the comms standby. Let's get rid of the flashing cursor. So if I move back here to layer A, and I'm on the comms radio now, I can bring that in and make that active. Okay, so we know the pressure. That was the standard 29.92, so we don't need to change that. But I would like to put in here a reminder of the runway that we were allocated. So I use my heading knob and I'll bring that round to 230. So the exact readout of the heading is here. You can see the bug here. Okay. So that's the sort of information we can get from the first page on here. Let's move back to layer B. So using the inner and outer here. Go back to nearest again. Briefly, we get this little reminder here, a pop-up, and it says we can look at nearest airports. I'll go out and in again. Let's go back into that. Nearest airports, nearest VOR, nearest NDB, and nearest intersection. And we can scroll through that using the inner knob, the right hand one. There's our nearest VOR. And if you remember back in our flight plan, there's Pole Hill, and on the chart here it says the frequency is 112.1, and if you wanted to find that here, bring up the cursor down to Pole Hill and it agrees here, and it's 15 nautical miles away, sorry, 24 nautical miles away. 15 degrees is the direction we need to go in. Now I haven't found any way yet of bringing that up here. If there is, I'd love to know how to do it. All I can do is go back to layer A and actually scroll it into here. So 112.1, and we'll make that active now. You can see we're close enough that it's actually found it, and it's found the identifier, so we know where we're looking. So that's okay. If we go back to here, here's the nearest non-directional beacons, the NDB, and we wanted to look at Leeds Bradford. So same procedure. Want to go to Leeds Bradford, and it gives us a frequency of 402.00. Again, if we look at our chart, that looks like it agrees, but actually this is an old chart, and I think that database in the G1000 is out of date as well, because if we look here, the actual pop-up tells us this is now 402.5. I think in the real world, the spread of frequencies and the accuracy of that radio would probably pick up 402 and 402.5. It wouldn't matter. But with the digital radios and this digital simulation, it really matters. In fact, I checked that out, and I took a screenshot of the world map, and lo and behold, Microsoft have got it in their world map as 402.5. So their simulation of the G1000 and their real world doesn't match, but that's what we're going to have to put in. So let's go back into the flight simulator, and I'll show you where we actually enter that. And we enter that back here on the primary flight display, and you can see here it's marked ADF and DME. DME is distance measuring equipment. Quite a few of the ADFs also have a DME broadcast, but I don't think Leeds Bradford does. So we bring that up, and that's the frequency, default frequency, and I want to use these knobs here, the primary flight display, outer and inner, to scroll that in. So it was 402, so we go down to 4. This first figure, it works with both of those digits. So 4, move across 0, 2, and we have to put the 0.5 in. Okay, now if I've simulated pressing that enter on this one here. So I press enter, that highlights the whole thing, and then now it says press enter to transfer. So we'll press enter, and you see that's transferred. That'll be active now. Okay, so we can close this down. And there are 2 bits of information I want to put on here. So using the PFD, I want to put a bearing on here, and the bearing on the left hand side I want to be my nav1. If I press that again, it'll go to nav2, nav3, GPS, which I haven't programmed in yet, ADF, and nothing. So it cycles around. So I want that to be nav1, and I want here to be the ADF. So bearing 2, I want that to be the ADF, and it says no data at the moment. We're too far away from that beacon for the radio to find it, so it hasn't found it yet. If it was transmitting a DME, a distance measuring, it will tell us how far away we are. Okay, so we can keep an eye on that. Okay, back over here. So what I want to do now is to actually put my flight plan in. So let's give you some detail here. Okay. Back to the map. So I'm going to press flight plan, and I'll do it on here. So layer B, flight plan, and there's nothing in, and we enter it by bringing the cursor up and doing what we did before when we were looking at airport information. Use this one here to scroll through the letters. So our departure is Echo Golf Charlie Charlie. And we'll press enter for that, and that's in the flight plan. The next place was Pole Hill, and you can see here the icon changing, telling us that that's an intersection that it's found. That's the non-directional beacon. So Papa Oscar Lima is what we're after. And there's Pole Hill. That's the symbol for the VOR that does give out the different radials. And you just check down here, it's a bearing of 15 degrees and it is 24 nautical miles away, so that looks like the right one. Enter, and that's in. Next item was the LBA, Leeds Bradford Airport, and it's non-directional beacon, so we can go LB A, and it was a non-directional beacon, but the icon that's come up is for a VOR, and the distance is 2,766 miles away, so I don't think that's the right one. But if we press enter, you'll see that it's found duplicates, and it prioritizes the VOR, which is wherever that is. Use the outer knob. I can actually select the Indy beat, which is in England, and it's 38 nautical miles away, so that sounds much more like it, so we can put that in. And now our final destination is the Doncaster Sheffield Airport. So as before, Echo Golf Charlie November, oops, back one, Charlie November, Doncaster Sheffield. Excellent, we'll enter that, and that's our flight plan. So we can stop the cursor flashing, and we can press the flight plan to get rid of that, just to tidy up. And what I would do now is I would just check on the range and make sure it looks like the right shape, and there it is, that looks fine. Okay, that's where we're going. Last little bit of preparation for flight over here. What I want to do is I'm going to take off, fly the runway heading using the heading bug, and then when we get permission I will pick up the VOR, and we know we wanted to go in according to all the data we've been given, including this flight plan here, that we should be flying out on 015. So back on layer A, I'm going to change course 1, change the VOR here, and you can see the VOR saying that we're pretty much on track already, even where we're parked, but we'll probably lose that as we start to fly, because we'll be taking off away from it, but we'll be able to fly back on that later. Okay, so what we can do now, and I'm going to use Microsoft's handy little shortcut for us here. I want to go to clearance on 121.705. So on my comms radio, 121.705. Make that active, and I want to request IFR clearance for my instrument flight plan.
Manchester clearance delivery Cessna Golf Bravo Mike IFR to Echo Golf Charlie November, ready to copy. Golf Bravo Mike is cleared to Echo Golf Charlie November Airport as filed. Takeoff runway 23 left climb and maintain 5,000 feet. Departure frequency is 118.775 squawk 5126.
Okay, so 5126. We need to put that into our transponder here. So transponder code 5126, and that's in here, and it's in standby mode. I did. Let's go back, and we'll turn that on. And now I'm going to read back the clearance.
Cessna Golf Bravo Mike cleared to Echo Golf Charlie November Airport as filed. Takeoff runway 23 left climb and maintain 5,000 feet. Departure on 118.775 squawk 5126. Cessna Mike readback is correct. Contact ground on 121.705 when ready to taxi. Good day.
It sounds pleasant at the end there. Okay. I also know we need to put in 5,000 feet as our target. So using the altimeter 1K, that's our target for taking off. And it said we need to contact ground when ready to taxi. It's also given us a departure frequency, so we could put that in and get that ready as well. But I'll come back to that later. Okay, welcome back. I've edited out the taxi to save you watching me steer. I've got some brand new pedals, only put them in today, and I haven't adjusted the sensitivity, so you missed the fun there. Okay, so what I've done here is I have put in the tower frequency and the departure frequency, so we're ready to change to that when we need to, and just going to ask for permission to take off. So request takeoff clearance.
Manchester Tower, Cessna Golf, Mike, ready for departure, runway 23, left IFR to Echo Golf, Charlie, November. Cessna Golf, Bravo, Mike, altimeter 29er.9er, 2 wind 271 at 7. Cleared for takeoff, runway 23 left. Cleared for takeoff, runway 23 left, Cessna Golf, Bravo, Mike.
Okay, I've got the heading bug set ready for runway 23. So what I'm going to do is arm the heading. So I'm pressing heading here, is armed, but we haven't turned the autopilot on. So we're still flying manually until I press the autopilot and bring the autopilot in. So off we go. Parking brake off. And we'll adjust the lighting. So entering the runway, put the strobe on. And we'll see how the pedals work this time. If you remember to watch out on the speed tape, you probably see when we get to 72 knots, you'll see the best climb speed marked. Okay, let's give it full power and away we go. Try manually flying the runway heading as best as possible until there's no usable runway left. And I think I'll bring the autopilot in now and also give it the best rate of climb, which has got it marked at 76, and it's I got the frequency wrong. 775.
Manchester Center, Cessna Golf, Bravo, Mike is passing 1,600 feet, climbing 5,000 feet. Cessna Golf, Bravo, Mike, Manchester Center, altimeter 29er.9er, 2, continue to Papa Oscar Lima as planned.
Okay, so we're cleared out to Pole Hill. And that's on the VOR, so we'll change now from heading to nav. We can tell it here what we want it to follow when I press the nav button, and that's on the CDI. So at the moment it's VOR1, VOR2, which we're not using, GPS, we could follow that, but I want to show you how to use the VOR. So bring it back to VOR, press nav, and that should now turn us on to that heading. We'll fly back over Manchester Airport and make our way up towards Pole Hill. Right, so 27 nautical miles to run to Pole Hill. ADF hasn't picked up yet. Still saying 402.5, so that's okay. And you can see now we're beginning to approach the 5,000. We're slightly above the Y reference because I programmed in 76, so we can bring that down to 74 and we should get a better rate of climb. And as we're above 3,000 feet, I need to think about throttle and mixture. So we'll bring the throttle back a bit so we're not stretching the engine too much, and I'm going to bring back the mixture, and I'm keeping my eye on the exhaust gas temperature. As I lean this out, the exhaust gas temperature should start to rise, but this gauge isn't really very clear. I'm leaning the mixture out and you can see it rising. I'm looking for is the peak temperature. If I go too lean, the temperature starts to go down again. That's about peak, so I just go slightly rich of peak, and that's the best efficiency now for that engine. We should start leveling out in a moment. As it Okay, so we've adjusted that for 7,000 feet, but I'll have to pick the flight level control again. We were too close to the 5,000 mark, so it had switched off the flight level change and taken us into altitude hold mode. So we'll honour that, and away we go. So the speed's coming back. As we level out, the speed will increase, of course, so I'll have to come back on the throttle and then check the mixture again. And we can see now it's picked up the ADF and it's telling us the frequency. And on our flight plan, it said that to get out of Pole Hill, we'll need to fly on 066. Well, at the moment, that's the direction to the beacon. So this will just move around on its own. And it's just pointing at the beacon, and when it gets to 66, that's when we need to make our turn. And what we'll do is we'll just put the heading bug around to 66. In fact, I could do that now, and we'll just ask it to fly the heading. So I would change from nav mode to heading mode once we need to make our change. So we'll take that around heading 66. It tells us here exactly what heading we've got in. Okay. Now, I normally fly this area VFR and using radio navs, but also just keeping an eye out of the window and using a map. It's a very distinct area, lots of reservoirs and rivers to follow. Every reservoir has its own profile and outline, so it's really good practice spotting them on the map. In fact, let's go outside and have a look around. There's a landmark, that's Manchester United's football ground. And somewhere over here, we're a bit high today, it's given us quite an altitude. You can find the Etihad Stadium, I believe. I'm not a football fan, but usually the stadiums are quite easy to spot. And you can see the distinct reservoirs here. It's quite a hilly area and it rains quite a bit, and there's some major cities around, so this is the area the reservoirs are. and they really are quite distinct. So finding your way around with maps navigation is pretty simple. This looks like we're getting towards some more football grounds here. Okay, I'll leave you for a while. This will settle at 7,000 feet, and we'll edit it back in once we get a little bit closer to Pole Hill, because we've got 19 miles to go. Okay, and welcome back. So we've got about 5 miles to go to Pole Hill. I want to request a lower altitude, I think, so you can see some of the ground features as we do this. So let's come down to 3,000 feet.
Manchester Center, Cessna, Mike. Request 3,000 feet. Cessna Golf Bravo, Mike, request denied.
Oh, not very nice. Let's try another one. Will give us 4,000.
Manchester Center, Cessna, Mike. Request 4,000 feet. Cessna, Mike, descend and maintain 4,000 feet.
Okay, so let's dial in 4,000 feet. I'm going to take this down using vertical speed. So vertical speed mode, and we'll take it down by 1,000 feet per minute. I need to throttle back.
Mike, acknowledge last transmission. Descend and maintain 4,000 feet, Cessna, Mike.
And you can see that the ADF is moving around towards our 66 degrees. So we're getting closer to the intersection point now, and we're 2.7 miles from Pole Hill. So when I get to my turn point, what I'll do is I'll switch it from nav to heading and drive ourselves off towards Leeds Bradford Airport. And there's the map, and there's our turn point. So we're getting quite close to it now. Let's just push the range a little bit, and that's where we're going. Okay, 1.4 miles to go, almost lined up. Altitude's coming down towards 4,000. And we're now below the clouds. Okay. So I think we can start the turn now. So let's press the heading button. So particularly flying on ADF, you're really relying on your heading bug, and you need to keep an eye open for any drift from the wind, because it won't keep you on course particularly. But that's it, and that will fly off towards Leeds Bradford quite happily now. Okay, what I want to do is actually to change it over now to the GPS and show you some features of the GPS. So I'll change the CDI here. That says VOR2, GPS, and I will switch it now onto nav mode here, and you'll see it change here. At the moment it's saying it's in heading mode, and it's now going to follow the GPS, and it'll actually turn us off to pick up the imaginary radial. We're slightly to the right of it, so it'll pick that up and correct that for us. And I'm just waiting for this to stabilise now at 4,000 feet, because we're going to lose some airspeed as we level out. What I can do now is I can change this on the PDF, and the bearing 2, I'll bring it to GPS. So it tells us how far we've got to go to Leeds Bradford. Because what I want to do is to show you what this feature does, the OBS. Our next waypoint is Leeds Bradford. And if I press OBS, what it does is it's going to suspend the actual GPS for the moment. And whoops, I'll press the right button in a second. And it's going to treat this, our next waypoint, as if it was a bit like a beacon. So I'm going to change the course button here, and you'll see that swing around. Now the runway for Leeds Bradford is actually 140, I believe. Yes, 140 degrees. So I'm going to change that course so it says 140. In fact, let's bring it back onto heading mode now. And I've actually programmed that here into a spare button that knob that I had available. Let's bring my heading bug back and I'll show you what I'm going to try and do. It takes a bit of time, this. So I'm going to fly up towards the north. So I'm going to change my heading bug to the north. I'm going to change this to the runway heading, pick up that using the GPS and fly the runway heading. So back to what I was saying, this course button here that I've got programmed in doesn't actually affect the OBS. It does here on the actual G1000, but it's sending a different code through X's and O's. And if I bring X's and O's in, this is what I have to send: GPS, OBS, decrease and increase. And I have actually programmed that into a spare that I had, rotary that I hadn't been using. If you remember back in a previous video, I had not allocated anything here, so I've now allocated OBS onto here. So down there I can change the OBS. Let's see that in action. So here's my OBS, and I want to turn that to 140, and it's telling me here when it's 140, so that should line up with Leeds Bradford's runway. So what I want to do now is fly my heading up here, swing it around and pick that up on the GPS. So I'm going to fly approximately north for a while and then switch it back into GPS mode, and it should pick that track up for us. So that OBS mode can be useful if you want to fly to a heading that doesn't into a runway that doesn't actually have a beacon nearby. You can create one by using a waypoint. What I quite like it, because if you fly to one of those smaller airports, that they bring you in and then they make you fly a circuit, where I sometimes would prefer to come in and be online, and then when you ask permission to land, they'll give you a straight in approach rather than having to fly the circuit. So it's up to you which you prefer, flying a circuit or achieving this fly straight in approach. But that's what I'm going to try and simulate here. So I'm going to fly here to about there and turn and bring it back, and I'll probably edit this little detour out and call you back in when we're a bit closer. Okay, see you later. Okay, so we're back. I'm 11 nautical miles away from Leeds Bradford and flying a parallel track away from it. So if I put it now back into GPS mode, it should turn around and pick up that track for us. So put it into nav mode, and it's beginning to initiate the turn. And it says it's following the GPS. And you can see that that carries on past the point. So we've still got the track following out, so we can follow that out. If we look at the range here, that takes us pretty close to where we want to be. But what I'll do is, as I come over the point here, I'll put it onto heading mode for a while, and then flick it back onto the proper GPS that we've got, the flight plan we've got programmed in. So if we go back to here, once that's captured, I'll bring that heading bug around so we've got that available to use. I often find it's a good idea to be in heading mode when you're making changes to flight plans or any other feature. So just leaving it on heading hold mode for the bug while we select other courses or other instruments to fly with. So let's get this range back. So it's getting close to the track now. You can see we're closing in on it. And in fact, there's the ADF beacon underneath here as well, so we know we're pointing at the beacon. And we've got about 7 nautical miles to run. And it's now going to initiate the turn and pick up the track. And there's the runway. We're picking up through the haze now. I'm at 4,000 feet, so I'm up in the haze layer. And it's accurate enough because it was using the LBA beacon as its waypoint, and that's actually slightly off the runway. It's to the left, so you'll see that we will fly slightly left of the runway. Okay, I think it's safe to bring the heading in line now, so synchronize our heading bug. So if I press this button here, you should see that heading bug come around to here. And there it is, that's synchronized now. So when I go over to heading mode, it will carry on and hold us in the right direction. Okay, and we've got 3.8 nautical miles to run. And again, if we take a quick look at the outside view, here's all the wonderful reservoirs we're talking about. And here we are, definitely flying slightly to the left. Okay, so I'm now going to select heading mode, and you'll see this change here to heading mode, and it'll hold on the blue bug for a while. Well, that's really useful. So, 7,000 feet. And we'll put that in as a flight level change. And we want to put an approach in. So ILS runway 20 and DM18 approach. So trying to arrange this so you can see this as clearly as possible. I'm going to put in a procedure. So it's a procedure, and we can select our approach. Enter, and it is ILS runway 20. Let's see what's available to us. ILS 20. So we'll select that. And the transition point was DM14B. So again, we'll select that. And it's now asking us to load it or activate it. I'm not going to activate it yet. I'll just load it. When we get and cross that waypoint, then it will pick that up quite happily and activate it automatically. So we'll just load that in. And now if we're going to have a look at our flight plan, there it is, and that's all the sequence that it'll be taking us. So we can see that on the map now. Let's get that out, and if we just range a little bit, you can see here's our approach path 14B, and it'll follow that. So let's go back to the primary flight display, and we'll make sure that we are now in GPS. We are, and nav mode. And it says we're going from our user waypoint, that's where we initiated it, to DM14. And I'm not quite sure what it thinks it's doing. I've got a feeling it's flying us back to that user waypoint. Let's see if we can fix this. It says it's trying to fly that leg there. and I'm going to tell it to fly direct. And we'll activate that. And let's see what's happening. Well, it looks more like it. Okay, I'll edit that out because we've got a fair way to run, and as we get closer to here I'll bring you back in again and you can see how this works. Okay, welcome back. We've now got about 10 miles to run to our entry point, transition point into the procedure. And I want to have time to find the ILS frequency for that runway 20. So, airport information for E G C N Doncaster Sheffield, that's where we're going, that's okay. And my ILS runway frequency, well, both frequencies are the same, 110.95, so I'll need to put that into the nav up here. So back on layer A, 110.95, and make that active. And into the comms, 126.225. Make that active. And tell them we're on our way. Okay, so what we're interested in seeing now is what happens when we reach there. Does it activate the other legs, or do we fly merrily straight on? So we need to keep our eye on that. That's where we're heading. And 4.6 miles to go. So we've put in the ILS frequency and you can see that it's picked it up, and it's realised it's a localiser, so you don't have to put in any direction here. It automatically points to the localiser, and it also puts this bar here which gives us the glide slope. Okay, so I'll put that in here. $3,500, and we'll take that down on a vertical speed. So we're in vertical speed mode, and we'll go down 1,000 feet per minute. And we'll come back on the throttle so we don't overspeed on our descent. And we've got 2 nautical miles to go. And it seems to have picked up where we want to go. So we can all relax. Let's turn the flight plan off. And it seems to be on its way around here. Okay, let's put a landing light on so they can see we're on our way. And at the moment that's the marker for the glide slope. So we're way above the glide slope. We really want to get that above us. So what we're flying here is called a DME arc. There's a beacon here, and you can fly that just with the DME equipment, and it will give you a distance that we're flying away from that arc. It's probably an 11 mile arc on this one. And all you're doing is flying and turning, and try to keep a regular distance away until you reach the localiser, and then fly down the localiser. Oh, it's a 12 mile DME arc. The GPS is doing all the hard work for us, but you can fly that just with the ADF DME equipment, keeping an eye on that distance there, and fly. Don't try and fly a regular curve when you fly this manually. You fly and you'll see the pointer move, turn, bring it back in line again, fly, and you'll see yourself going off course. So just do it in bites, straight line, straight line, straight line, to work your way around. So you take bites out of it rather than try to fly a smooth curve. But the GPS is doing the main work for us today. And now you can see we're below the glide slope. That's great. So we'll be able to stabilise on at 2,500, and as we turn around we can pick up the glide slope. So that's where we're heading, somewhere over in that direction. We should be able to find Doncaster, Sheffield. It's a little hidden in the hills. Okay, we're coming up on to 2,500 now. And you can see on here it's gone into altitude hold now. It's not on vertical speed anymore. We've now into altitude hold, and you can see that on here as well. altitude hold for 2500, so it's making the last few minor adjustments. We're losing some airspeed, so a little bit more throttle. And let's have a look and see how far the progress is over here. Making our way around. To D352. There's D352. Then it'll make its way around. These are the virtual waypoints. There's nothing on the ground, nothing in the real world. It's all just coordinates programmed into the GPS. So that's where it's going to become interesting, and we'll pick up the localiser and fly it on there. Just going to check the mixture again. Looking at the exhaust gas temperature, because we have dropped quite a bit of altitude. So I'm looking for that peak exhaust gas temperature again. Which appears to be about there. So go slightly rich of that. Give a bit of engine cooling. Okay, so we're on to the next waypoint, D006. And there we'll be on our last one before the turn in. Getting closer. Now, because you've got the localiser frequency already programmed in here, as we make our final turn in, when it picks up the localiser, this should change automatically from GPS mode into localiser mode. We shouldn't have to touch anything. But what it won't do is pick up the glide slope automatically. We actually have to change here into approach mode for that to happen. It will indicate it, but it will fly straight through the glide slope and won't pick it up and descend automatically unless we put it into approach mode. But you'll see that happen in a minute. So we've got about 2 miles to go. Oops. To this turn point here, and that then should bring us in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of airspeed off now, because I don't really want to go and overshoot. So we'll pull back now, start to lose, and I'm going to go onto a richer mixture. And it gets a bit busy now because we start to have some radio transmissions coming in as well. But keep an eye on this change here and see when we make the turn, you should see it switch over to localiser. There's the final turn now. We're coming in onto that localiser, but we're still in GPS mode. There's our turn coming in. So, and I've already blinked and missed it because I was looking at my radio frequencies, but there you are, that's changed. So now I'm going to put it into approach mode. And you see here it says it's ready to catch the glide slope. So we're going to tune the tower now and announce that we're here. 128.775. Tune to the tower and tell them we're on our way.
Tower Cessna Golf Bravo, Mike 11 miles, north inbound ILS runway 20 approach. Cessna Golf Bravo, Mike Tower. Altimeter 29.9er, 2 wind 270 at 7. Cleared ILS runway 20 approach. Cleared ILS runway 20 approach Cessna, Mike.
Okay, so we know we're on the localiser, and the glides, we're coming in to meet the glide slope. That's going over our heads at the moment, but as we get closer we'll be coming into contact with it. And because I put it into approach mode, you can see it's in approach mode here, and it's saying ready to capture the glide slope here. It should start to descend once they line up. Of course the airspeed will go up, so we need to keep an eye on that airspeed. What we want to do is to bring it down into this white line area here so we can start to deploy flaps. Now it's a bit hazy, but we should be able to get to the peak of the runway pretty soon. But we're going to trust the instruments for a while. It's a pretty choppy wind up here as well today. Ah, here we are, coming through the haze now. There we are. Picked it up. Now I don't know if it's the wind that's choppy or this is just after the latest update, and I think the autopilot is a bit choppier since then. There are, we've picked up and we're now descending on the glide slope, airspeed increasing, so we'll pull back on the throttle and we'll start as I head towards the flaps down speed. And we've got 7 miles to run now. You can't see what I'm doing, but I'm slowly bringing the throttle back. Slowly bringing that speed down.
Cessna Mike, wind 270 at 7. Cleared to land runway 20. Cleared to land runway 20 Cessna, Mike.
Okay, so the speed in the white area, I could start to bring my flaps in. But as soon as I put the flaps in, I'll get some more drag, so I'll probably have to watch the throttle. Okay, my flaps indicator is down here. And I've gone to the first notch of flaps, which gives you a clearer view of the runway, so it brings the nose down a little bit. And I'm washing that throttle. I'm still on autopilot. And you can see it's swinging us around all over the place. Oh, it's stabilising a bit more now. if you remember, there's a bit of a bug with the autopilot. If I press the button here, the light will go out here, definitely disengage, but it will still be saying the autopilot's on here. We can't find out how to get that indicator to go away, but you should hear the chime. Let's watch that throttle getting a bit fast. Let's bring one more layer of flaps in, stabilize that, and take the autopilot out. Autopilot's now out, and it's in my own capable hands. And I'm still struggling with these new pedals. Putting a bit of left rudder in now to bring us across to the left. Flaps up so we can't take off again. Okay, so we'll turn the strobe, landing light off, taxi light on, and if you want to stay with me till we park, you're welcome to watch. But I hope that was of some use to you. I'm leaving it as warts and all, the few wrong buttons that I pressed, and that little diversion back to a user waypoint. That was fun, but I did show you how to get out of it. But the thing is, stay calm, press some buttons. And let's get a quick taxi back to parking.